Hello class, let's take a look at a justification of why the rule works when we're dividing fractions. Now, this one's a little bit harder to visualize than the previous example. Remember that the main rule technically says, well, if you have A divided by B and you're going to divide by C over D, this is equivalent to A over B times the values of C over D, as long as you rewrite it as AC over BD. And technically BD is not equal to 0. So basic rule on dividing fractions. Now for this actual problem, let me work it out and then I'll explain the meaning of, in this case, the division. So this represents 1/3 and you're going to be dividing it by technically 3 over 1. And in this case, this is 1/3 times well, technically 1/3, because remember that the rule says you change division to multiplication and invert the fraction. So in this case, our final answer represents, well, technically a 1/9. Now, let me explain what this 1/9 actually represents. And if you technically have 1/3, which in this case, this is what we have with the original 1/3, that means that if you're looking at an integer, well, you're basically dividing it into 3 pieces. This 1/3 from the original problem actually represents this portion. So that's what this one represents. Whoops. So this 1/3 represents one of 3 pieces. Now, when we talk about a division of, well, 1/3 divided by 3, this is what it actually means on an area problem. It means that if you technically have, well, 1/3, in this case, we're looking at this 1/3, and you're going to divide it into 3 pieces. So that means that we're looking at, well, now this as if it was an integer. This is 1, 2, so technically you're looking at 1, 2, and 3 pieces. Keep in mind that you're still talking about the actual original 1/3, but if you were to actually break the entire integer into, well, equal pieces, you would have that this is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And the main answer, which is a little bit hard to visualize, is that each one of these pieces, and I'm just talking about each one of these, actually represents, well, 1/9 out of the entire shape. But we're talking about each of these pieces representing 1/9 of the entire shape. So that's what division by fractions actually means on an area problem. You're looking at, well, some sort of an integer already broken down into pieces, and then by dividing by another value or fraction, you're further breaking it down into more pieces. Your final answer, in this case the 1/9, represents what each of the individual pieces ends up being out of the whole shape.